What's up, guys? I'm BTC. The Hanzo rework is here, and it has turned him into one of, if not the best DPS character in the entire game. But there brings another problem. The question is he too good? Now, I know what some of you guys might be thinking. Oh, he's just gonna complain that Hanzo's overpowered and he needs a nerf. Nope, not at all. I don't think Hanzo is overpowered. I think he's very strong, but overall, I think he's in a really good place. He doesn't need any changes beyond what he's just recently got. And it's really nice that Blizzard also bumped up the skill ceiling of the character as well. We'll go into that a little bit later, but the problem with Hanzo is not that he's overpowered, it's that he just totally overshadows several of the other DPS. And he does their job better than they do. Specifically, I'm talking about Mccree and Widowmaker. The rework was a significant upgrade for Hanzo. He now has more mobility, he can escape a lot easier, he now has more damage, but more important than that, it's consistent damage. So in the past with Scatter, it was kind of an all or nothing thing. Either you landed and took out the enemy, or you missed and did almost no damage. But also on top of that was if you used the Scatter on a 200 hit point target, then you ended up losing about half of that damage. It just kind of went into nothing. But now with the Storm Arrow, you can use that, and if you miss one of those shots, well, you still have 5 arrows left to do more damage. But on top of that, you can also spread it out. So you can use 2 arrows to take out one target, and then 2 to take out another, and then you still have 2 more arrows to use on whatever else you need to. So you can spread out all that damage. And because of all that consistent damage, you can now build your ultimate a lot faster. Not to mention, they also changed the Sonic Arrow, which was a really big improvement. The point that I'm trying to make and get across to you guys in this video is because of the new Hanzo, there's almost no reason to pick a Mccree or a Widowmaker when you can use Hanzo instead. And I want to emphasize something here. This isn't the same as the Zarya situation that I talked about the other day. This isn't because of the meta or the environment or any of that sort of stuff. With Hanzo in the game as he is now, there's really no reason to ever pick a Mccree or a Widowmaker instead of Hanzo. So let's start comparing these. The first one we're going to look at is Mccree. Now, there is a little bit of an advantage because Mccree is hit scan, whereas Hanzo is projectile. But the thing is, they just drastically increased the speed of those arrows to the point where they're not hit scan, but they're still really, really fast, and it almost doesn't matter in the vast majority of situations. I mean, Hanzo is now a really good counter to Pharah because the arrow speed is so much faster. You really don't have to worry about the Pharah being high up in the air and using a hit scan. You can use Hanzo now, and it's really not an issue. Here's the funny thing, though. There actually might be an advantage for Hanzo in this situation. Now that the arrows move fast enough to hit the Pharah, you don't necessarily need that hit scan, but with hit scan, there's damage fall off. With Hanzo's projectile attack, there is no damage fall off. So while Mccree might be hitting the Pharah for reduced, Hanzo's gonna hit for full damage every single time. Now, as far as mobility goes, it's not even close. Hanzo just absolutely destroys Mccree in the mobility department. So Hanzo can climb up walls, he's got the air jump, the lunge, which allows him to get to other places, and he can also use it to evade or to advance and all that sort of stuff. The only thing that Mccree has is the roll, which is on a longer cooldown. It's not remotely as effective for any kind of real mobility, and you can't use it when you're in the air, which is actually more of an annoyance than you might think. Now, it does give the added benefit of reloading for Mccree, but Hanzo doesn't need to reload ever anyways, so it's not a big deal. The other thing is the Fan the Hammer versus the Storm Arrows, or Fan the String, as some people have called it. This is not even close. Mccree's Fan is only good at extremely close range, and it cannot headshot. Whereas the Storm Arrows is good pretty much whenever you want. Yes, it has a cooldown and it's an ability, but you have full control over it. You can fire off all the arrows as fast as you want, or you can fire them off one at a time more slowly. But the best thing is that, yes, you can aim it and put the arrow exactly where you want it, and they can headshot. So the fan the string is just so much better than fan the hammer, not even close. As for the ultimates, again, not even close. Dragon Strike is far better and far more useful than High Noon will ever be. This is a whole nother issue. I don't want to go too far on a tangent here, but there are serious problems with High Noon. If you look at any of the high skill players or even the pro players, when they use Mccree, they very rarely actually use the High Noon in order to try to get eliminations. It's primarily used as a zoning tool, basically to force all of the enemy out of a specific area so you can kind of capture a point or force them off of a point, whatever it happens to be. But if you watch the Overwatch League, you'll often see the pro Mccree players using their ult to simply reload. That's how useless Mccree's ultimate is. What you usually see from the pro Mccree players is they'll fire off all of their ammo, then they roll to reload, then they fire off all of that ammo, then they use their ultimate and immediately cancel it to get more ammo. Like, that's what the ult is basically used for. Zoning and reloading, and that's it. And let's not forget, when you use High Noon, and if you actually try to charge it up, you glow about 100 times brighter than the sun, and you're probably gonna get destroyed before you can actually use it. Dragon Strike, on the other hand, has all of the strengths and none of the weaknesses. It's also a very powerful zoning ability. If you need to get the enemy team off of the payload or the capture point, one of the most surefire ways to do it is to fire 2 gigantic spinning dragons at them. I guarantee you most of them will move very quickly. Now, you may not get any eliminations from it because they move away, but you're going to get them off the point. Now, as far as being able to hit them with it, well, it combos with one of the best abilities in the game, which is Zarya's ult. You get a grab and lock in a bunch of the enemy teams. Unless they have a Zen Transcendence, you're pretty much going to get play of the game from that. Also, Hanzo can use his ultimate from behind a wall, so the enemy will never even be able to attack you while you're firing off your ult. What about characters that Mccree would usually be used to counter, like Pharah? Well, I already mentioned that. There's really no issue anymore for Hanzo because the arrows move as fast as they do now. And then you have other things like barriers. You could use the fan the hammer, roll, fan the hammer in order to destroy the barriers. But guess what? Storm Arrow works just as well now. And then you have other situations where Tracer might come into play, because Mccree was often used as kind of like a soft counter to Tracer. You would get the stun, and then you could easily fan or get the headshot, and you would be able to take the Tracer out. Well, the thing is, if you miss with the stun, you're pretty much toast as the Mccree. You can try to get those shots in as the Tracer's moving around, but the relatively slow rate of fire for Mccree made it a little bit difficult, and if you missed, again, you were pretty much toast. But with Hanzo, one, you can either just avoid her by climbing up something or jumping across something or whatever it happens to be, and then you can just use storm arrows, and you don't have to worry about it because you pretty much land one shot and you can take her out. And the storm arrow doesn't suffer from any sort of rate of fire stuff. You basically just line it up and start firing off those arrows, and there's a pretty good chance you're gonna take the Tracer out. You don't even need the stun. Now let's look at Widowmaker. There's not too much to talk about because pretty much everything she does, Hanzo can now do better. So in terms of mobility, this is the closest. It's kind of some advantages for Hanzo, some advantages for Widow. She has the grapple, she can get up to much higher areas, and she can also get there a little bit faster, but there's a kind of decent cooldown on it. Whereas Hanzo can wall climb anytime he wants, but now the lunge allows him to put that distance from whoever is trying to come after him a lot more often. So some advantages, disadvantages for both of them. Now in terms of damage, Hanzo is going to have a much higher total damage output simply because he doesn't have to scope in, and now the rapid fire of the storm arrows allows him to just output a tremendous amount of damage really anytime he wants. And for Widowmaker, she has to do those scoped fully charged shots in order to really get any sort of good damage. So the time it takes her to scope in, to charge up, Hanzo's already fired off a couple arrows, or he can just use the storm arrow ability and fire off 6 arrows in less than 2 seconds. and any one of those, if they're a critical, is enough to take out any hero with 200 hit points or less. There's really no comparison in the total damage potential or the speed at which they can do damage. Admittedly, Widowmaker does have an advantage at extreme long range, but for most fights that take place kind of mid to long range, that's not going to be an issue for Hanzo. Now, in terms of ultimate, again, no comparison. Dragon Strike is so much better for the damage potential, the combo potential, the zoning potential, all that sort of stuff. Not to say that Widowmaker's ult is useless, but in terms of effectiveness and actual impact during the fights, the Dragon Strike is just so much better. But with the changes to Sonic Arrow, it's almost as good as Widowmaker's ult is anyways, because while Widowmaker does allow you to see every enemy all over the map, what Hanzo can do now is, because they drastically reduced the cooldown on it, you can now use the Sonic Arrow quite often and have the uptime on it very high. So that means you can always be checking out the choke points or the rooms or the corners. Whatever you need, whatever is going on at that time, Hanzo can keep that vision in that area. And of course, it's way better than Widowmaker's little Venom Mine thing, because with Sonic Arrow, everybody on your team gets to see it, whereas the Venom Mine, only the Widowmaker gets to see it. So when you look at all the different pieces, Hanzo just absolutely crushes every other character that has some kind of a similar role. So he has a lot more mobility, he has escape, he has higher rate of fire in most cases, he does more damage, more consistent damage, he's good at shield breaking, his ultimate is really good at zoning and comboing with other stuff. I mean, when you compare him to like Mccree and Widow, like everything that Mccree and Widow can do, everything that they're good against, Hanzo is just better. Like I said, there's no reason to pick those characters. But the thing is, I think if you were to nerf Hanzo, it would put him back into what he used to be before, which was an incredibly bad spot. So I don't think that Hanzo is too powerful. I think it's just the other characters don't have anywhere to shine now. Like, they're just completely being overshadowed. So Widowmaker has a couple of issues. I think her ult needs some adjustment, to be sure. The Venom Mine definitely needs some adjustment. When you look at Mccree, the role needs adjustment. At least let him use it in the air. That is so frustrating when you can't use the role in the air. And then you also have the ultimate, the High Noon, which has just all kinds of problems like that. I don't think that Mccree or Widow need any sort of substantial buffs. I just think that the kind of uniqueness of the character needs to be emphasized a little bit more, so it gives players a reason to pick Mccree instead of Hanzo, or to pick Widow instead of Hanzo. I think that would be the best course of action. So what do you guys think about all this? Let me know down below. Thanks for watching. Make sure to check out my Discord server. Follow me on Twitch and Twitter. The links for that stuff are down below. And remember, always blame the controller, because it's never your fault. Also, special thanks to all my Patreon supporters for helping to make this all possible. If you'd like to see what kind of cool rewards you can get for supporting the channel, check the links on screen and down below.